Let's bring it over to Alberta, because I think I'm experiencing much of what Maxime Bernier and also Randy Hillier talked about. Is there doesn't seem to be the full, robust, cross the spectrum discussion about whether these measures are appropriate, whether they work. I know that we've got a few more political voices, so we've got a voice in opposition as well as a voice in government who have both spoken up. Let's start with Paul Hinman first, and same question to you, Paul. Why did you join the Liberty Caucus? Oh, we got you on mute there, Paul, if you want to unmute.
Sorry about that. The most important thing that we have as citizens is our freedom, and countries are brought together, and constitutions are written in a way to protect the life, the freedoms, the property, and the pursuit of happiness of individuals. And we've got a premier who continually stands up, and what he's busy protecting is the integrity of a faulty healthcare system. And he puts all Albertans, to the back burner and say, well, we've got to protect this healthcare system, when he's done nothing, even in this last year, to create a more robust and capability of treating people. And this is just the right thing to do. And any time that freedoms are being lost, if we don't step forward and protect those freedoms, other people's freedoms, it's ours that's going to be impacted eventually. And freedoms, it's just, I'm sorry, Danielle, but this is what we have to fight for. And you look at World War I and World War II and the fight that we've had in Asia and stuff, it's always about freedom. And tyrants and those individuals, those totalitarians, the authoritarians, they want to strip it away from us. And again, we have a government that seems to think that they have a better idea on how to look after our health, our wellness, our safety. And again, it's not about allowing people to get the information and make the personal risk. That this is a tyrannical government that is literally stripping away our freedoms and telling us that we don't know how to assess our risk or how to carry on our lives. And I've met too many business people, whether they're restaurant owners, whether they're hairdressers, the gym owners, they've been, their business and their life has been destroyed. And the number of, family domestic violence and just the problems, there's no question, it's been over and over. The lockdowns are causing more harm than the virus, and it's just wrong. And I'm so grateful for Randy for starting this up. If I hadn't been exposed to politicians and that lifestyle, I would have had hurt feelings he didn't call me in that first 5.
Thanks for that, Paul. Talk to me a little bit more, though, because we often hear the premier say, and I can quote his lines. He says, oh no, we are balancing lives and livelihoods, and we have some of the least amount of restrictions of any jurisdiction in Canada. And we've had more businesses that have been able to seamlessly operate since the beginning of this than anywhere else in Canada. You're seeing it a little bit differently. Why is that? If we do, I saw that we've got someone from Peterborough and we've got others watching from the rest of the country. Put your perspective on what the premier says. Why do you think he's not telling the whole story?
Well, I got to start off with what I find most disgusting and wrong with that is when he starts to talk about balance every day. And it's not that these aren't insignificant. We hear about the impact of COVID, but he doesn't talk about suicides. He doesn't talk about domestic violence. He doesn't talk about bankruptcies. None of those things count. It's only the fear mongering that COVID is causing all the grief and all the pain in the world. He's not balancing anything. What he's trying to do is to bump his numbers up for a higher approval rating. He's looked at other provinces and they've clamped down and approval rating's gone up. And so to me, he's made a purely political decision. Oh, what have I got to do? Everybody else is having higher approval ratings. I'm going to clamp down. I mean, it was how many days after he promised and apologized for shutting down and picking and choosing businesses that are essential and those that aren't. I'm sorry, but you talk, every business is essential to that person who owns it. You can't balance that. The worst thing that I've ran into, Danielle, is I met a young mother who lost her 16-year-old son last September, because he was so discouraged and decimated that he couldn't go back to school. And where we're doing the most harm and the most damage is with our children. What we've done to them it's worse than telling them that the monster lives in the closet, it's going to come out and get you at night. That this fear mongering that we've instilled on our children it's so insidious and wrong. It's upsetting.
I mean, with that, it sounds like they're now sort of reluctantly perhaps maybe looking at doing a regional approach. It sounds like in Quebec and Ontario, they already have a regional approach. Do you have any more insights about what happened, why the flip, and why the Premier seems to have dug in and won't go back to the same kind of balance he had before? You're on mute there, Paul.
There we go. Thank you. I think the most significant one is that this whole thing has been driven by polls and public opinion, and it's not driven by the science, the data. That's out the window. And so when you start doing that, it's like the wind. It changes, your course changes, and there's nothing set. I mean, he had all these goalposts. As soon as he got to them, they were thrown out the window. And I think he's just purely driven by the fact of what have we got to do to gain popularity? What are people thinking? What are they wanting? I know that they're polling all the time, and he comes out with his numbers. They don't, what would I say, align with the more independent ones, but yet that's what he's using for guiding. But the bottom line is that people need their freedom, and what people that are wanting the lockdowns and stuff fail to see is that they have their freedom to stay home. They have their freedom to wear a mask out there. That they want to point the finger and blame that you're the curse of society. You're the one that's causing the problems, and we need to remove these elements for the benefit of the good of the group. And they're losing on the individual. And like I say, the only individuals they count, and they do it, anonymously, are the COVID responses. When the harm that's being done, like I say, to our children, to business people, to families, it's just unbelievable that all those numbers are not being looked at. When he says he's balancing things, there's nothing to balance when you don't say the numbers. They don't say that, look, we had 15 opioid deaths in the last day or anything else. It's just COVID. And so they've lost perspective. They're doubling down. This is what I want to say tyrants and politicians do, is they just want to keep doubling down, thinking they're going to get out of this. But this is no different than the fact of the deficits. They get away with deficit spending year after year after year, and they've never hit the wall. Unfortunately, the deficit of our loss of our freedoms is going to hit a wall much sooner. And again, the tragedy of it and the crisis that it's going to cause and is causing is just beyond acceptance, and we've got to stop that. It's a real problem.
Hear you say that, Paul. Where are you getting your information from as well? Because I guess the point is that I understand that there's suppression. I totally get that. But if I've been able to find alternative opinions, and I'm just a member of the media, you guys are in public roles. You're getting emails from political parties. This is not hard information to get, and so a lack of knowledge on the part of Premier Jason Kenney or Premier Doug Ford or Premier Francois Legault, that doesn't fly with me. That they could seek out the information if they wanted to, and I just want to know where you're getting it from. So, Paul, where do you get your information from?
Well, I'm going to say that the three that have been the most helpful, it's always good to go local. And again, with Dr. Dennis Modry, Dr. Jaffrey, you have Dr. Hodkinson, they've been awesome in speaking out. And again, I mean, they've received, like Dr. Hodkinson shared me his letter that the College of Physicians has sent to him and other physicians on speaking out. And so I totally agree. I think it's shameful that our own government hasn't put out this information every day. That should be their job, is to gather this information. And again, you listen to Kristi Noem, she has it. There's so many doctors down in the States. I mean, I really like the testimony of Dr. Corey Perry when he went before the Senate and others, and the Great Barrington Declaration. All of those ones that you're talking about, they're out there and they're available, but they're being dismissed. And the censorship, I mean, I've been kicked off of YouTube because of this as well, and been deplatformed. And so the censorship is just unbelievable. But the sad thing is that there's still too many people that are trusting Henshaw and Kenney, that they're there for us, and they don't realize that that they're not there for us. They're there to protect their little fiefdom and what they're trying to do, and it's just appalling that they're not bringing these other alternative views or allowing them to say, people should look at these, because we should have been doing a lot more research. Again, even with therapeutics, there's no reason not to be having those going on in our own province, in our own senior care facilities, and showing that the results are very positive, and yet they're not doing it. But it's out there. You go on the internet, you start looking. It's difficult, but again, There's just so many names out there. And again, when you go to England or Ireland, there's a doctor. Germany, there's lots of people speaking out there, and they're forming groups. And you just need to Google search it. And there's lots out there that haven't been deplatformed yet, but it's getting more and more difficult. And again, they're certainly cutting down on our ability here, and the censorship is just shocking to me. It's as bad as the fact that the government won't protect our freedoms, and again, destroying people's lives and their livelihood, and claiming that they're trying to balance it when they don't look at the individual that they're running over, and saying, well, that's all part of the balance. It isn't.
And I'm not going to hold anybody in negative light for March and April. I felt at that time, because we had enough information coming out of Italy and China to know that it was those with pre-existing conditions and those who were aged who were most at risk. But you know what? You never know. Things could develop differently. I get that. But it became very, very clear with the abundance of evidence that was the case. And to me, we could have ended up going lockdown free as soon as we hit the summer, and the caseload ended up declining, and just done focused protection once we had a new respiratory virus season in the fall and winter. So I'm still a little bit perplexed with knowing that there are these therapeutics out there in case somebody gets sick, knowing that you can take a vaccine as a preventative if you're in one of those high-risk groups. And I think we keep bragging that we've got all the high-risk groups with at least their first shot, and then rapid testing on top of that you're able to at least target the long-term care facilities so that anyone going in and out, you'd be able to know right away whether they were infected. It seems like these are enough tools. So what am I missing, Paul?
Well, I don't think we're missing anything, and it's very alarming the way she phrased it, and I do agree. Back in March and April, it was a little bit scary. The video that they were showing was certainly scary for people. But even back then, when they originally were putting out that numbers, they didn't say every day that, oh my goodness, we've had 20 deaths, and by the way, 19 of those deaths were in long-term care facilities with people with 3 or 4 more coexisting problems. That they didn't ever do that. And government's job should have been to give confidence and hope, and instead all they do is instill fear, and they put the numbers out there in such a way to instill fear. Again, I'll keep saying what they've done to the grandchildren who are afraid to go see their grandparents now. And again, I've talked to several grandparents, my mother included. This isn't living, being in isolation. My mother deteriorated terrible over the year of isolation, and it was not good for her health. The harm was done. She's since passed away, and again, it is just terrible that last year. And the last week, I was finally allowed to go in without having to try and cheat the system to go see my own mother, because they said, well, like she's at the end, and it's just wrong. You can't get together for a family funeral. Everything that they're doing is wrong. And to say that, oh, we now have a vaccine so they can come in, I mean, this is an experimental vaccine. We don't even know the repercussions. And the biggest problem that we're doing, and what scares me the most, is that we're taking away our innate immune system and something that has protected humanity from the beginning, and we're saying that doesn't work anymore. But what we'll do is give you a specific vaccine for a specific virus, and so you won't get the broad spectrum. Your body's not going to respond to this. And again, the lockdowns have delayed the inevitable, to where now, if in fact we have a breakout, how bad and how severe is it going to be? And again, in the year that the government has done nothing. If they needed more respiratory therapists, there was a lot that they could have been training in a year. They could have been building facilities. We could have so much of more robust system where we even separate and have facilities that are purely for treating people with COVID, so we don't have to shut down our main facilities. And they've done nothing except for continue and perpetuate the fear mongering and the scaring, and it's just wrong. And no, I don't agree with Michelle. We don't need to wait 20 days. We don't need new numbers. We need to recognize the fact that this is like every other virus that we've had, and sometimes more people are affected. But the young and our children, they should be in school. They should be singing. They should be dancing. They should be out doing their sports. And we're not allowing them to do any of that. And no, I disagree that we need to open up and then practice, that focused protection for seniors. But even that's been over the top and not in their best interest.
We'll talk about that. I want to go back to Paul and see what your view is on this. Do you think that it's the regional approach is one we should take? Here's the challenge that we have. the public has been in such a state of fear for so long. I think politicians now need to baby step walk everybody off the brink and get them back to some kind of sense of normalcy. And I don't know if there's would be widespread public support if Jason Kenney came out and did what we've seen in some of those states in the United States, just 100% allowing businesses to reopen. I think they'd be quite happy if he just lived up to the staged reopening plan that he put forward. What do you think? Do you see it differently?
Yes, I truly do see it differently, and I agree with what they're saying. Rip the bandage off, but there's a couple things, I guess. Basically, I actually believe in people to have faith in their assessment on what their health is, on what their wellness is, and what their safety is. And by ripping the band-aids off, it doesn't say that everybody's got to go out and go to the gym tomorrow and exercise for a half hour. Those people who have the confidence and the ability and the health to go do that can. That we don't need government monitoring and deciding every aspect of our lives. And so by ripping the band-aids off, there will be a slow transition, because many people are paranoid and won't go out to do those things, but let the public do it. But probably what scares me the most, and hasn't been mentioned here, is what the government really needs to do is actually pass legislation protecting individuals. And again, I guess I should say, back our Constitution of our freedoms and our property, starting with our own body. But what we need is to actually have legislations where businesses are going to be fined or criminally charged if they're going to force people to take vaccinations or not come in here. We need to start protecting the individual from big government, because they want to impose it. And businesses saying, oh, you can't come in here, or this. Look at Israel and the state they're in with a vaccine passport. We need to start protecting the individual, not just rip the band-aids off, but tell all these people that we've instilled so much fear in these corporations and saying it's their civil duty is to say, whoa, 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 back off. If you start pointing a finger and demanding people to do these things, we're going to be charging you. We need to protect the individual. We need to allow freedom. And again, all of those other things that they're talking about, inflation and the impact. And again, the most important thing that we always talk about local economies is to buy local. And again, energy security is so paramount, and yet we've been locked in here, and we've got this hate, and the Supreme Court, just ruled against the carbon tax. And yet, so okay, let's bring stuff in, from Venezuela, from Saudi, all of these rogue nations and stuff will bring in, which hurts our economy with the inflation. Now more than ever, we should be looking at Northern Gateway, Energy East. We should be doing all we can, the Eagle Spirit Energy Corridor, and working with our First Nations. There's so many opportunities that we could have if we just backed up and said, you know what, we're wrong. We need to let people have their freedom, and then they can assess their risk, and we're going to support them in that, and we're not going to allow this intrusion and liberty that's been lost any longer.
Let me put it to you, Paul. Do you think that the politicians, regardless of political stripe, are all angling to find a way to make this last forever? Or do you think that they are genuinely looking for a window where they can open up and reduce restrictions?
Well, I don't think that I know too many. They're looking for a window. They're looking for excuses to hold it down. This is like deficit spending. They haven't paid the consequences. And again, Drew, I'm going to give the invitation to you. I wrote to all the UCP MLAs before, but we need 20 of you, 23 of you to say end the lockdowns. We're not going to sit in caucus. We'll go sit as independents until the province-wide lockdowns are done. And again, make the amendments to recall so we can actually hold people accountable, not in 2 more years, but tomorrow, and start collecting signatures where 50% plus one of the number of last voters is credible and can get it for 120 days. But we're begging, the UCP MLAs need to stand up. Those that know that it's wrong, join this and then step outside, take away the majority government from Jason Kenney and say no more. We're going to protect Alberta's freedoms. We're going to protect businesses. We're going to protect those religious freedoms. We're going to allow people to exercise their own due diligence and be responsible for their health, their wellness, and for their safety. It's not government's job. Government's job is to protect the individual and to make sure there's a level playing field. And no, we need those elected individuals to step forward and say no more, because the rest of us, all we can do is sign go to rallies, sign petitions, and then that's not good enough when you don't have accountability through recall. And Jason Kenney's recall bill is just an absolute, it's an insult to Albertans.
And so no more lockdowns.ca if you want to check that out. Let me go to Paul Hinman now. And Paul, what's your practical advice for people? How should people be acting? What should people be doing? How do you make a difference?
Well, first of all, thanks, Danielle, for hosting us tonight. Thanks, Randy, for creating the Liberty Caucus. And that's really what it's about, personal independence. I remember when I was young, I was so excited to turn 16 and get my driver's license and have some independence to move around. When I was 18 and became an adult and personally responsible for my actions and could do that, is great. Freedom and independence is what has made the world as great as it is where we see it. And we've lost our freedom. We've lost our independence. Alberta Premier Kenney needs to be taking all the steps necessary for us to become an independent nation. We should be having and collecting our own taxes and the federal taxes here. We should have our own police force. We should have our own Alberta pension plan. We have our own environmental act, our own immigration policies. All those things need to be taken now, and we need to have the people. My invitation and encouragement is to go to our website, wildrose.party, and to join up. If you want to send a message to Premier Kenney, you want to send a message to Trudeau, join wildrose.party and become a member, make some donations. They see that every quarter, what the numbers are doing, and that's the best message I think that you can send to them. But the people, as Randy has said, as Maxine has said, we need to stand up, and my biggest fear is we need to stand up and against those corporations and start punishing them for saying, if you don't have the vaccination, if you don't do these things, we're taking away your freedom, your choice on experimental vaccination that we don't know whether it's going to work or not. I've talked to doctors that are working in senior care facilities. They've all received the double shots. They're all still wearing masks. They still can't have people come in. There is no end to this unless we stop and say no more. The lockdowns need to end, rip the bandage off, allow people to exercise their own personal independence, look after their wellness, and it's not the government's job. The government job is to protect our independence, our freedoms, not to strip them away and say that we're not capable of making those decisions. So stand up, speak out, otherwise this won't end. And again, the best thing that we have right now because of our current provincial government is recall in 2023. They need to be fired and sent out of here and go live in your own prisons, but don't tell us that we have to live in yours.
All right, thank you for that, Paul Hinman. So